Hawker Hurricane was the bridge between two eras of aviation. When it first flew in November 1935, it was the RAF's first monoplane fighter and the first to exceed 300 miles per hour. Designed by Sidney Cam, it represented a critical evolution.
The Hurricane used Hawker's well-known, well-tried and tested production techniques, which they'd used with their biplanes for many years, which is why it looks as it is. We've got essentially a cantilever tubular structure on the inside the fuselage, covered then in wooden formers, stringers and fabric, and then we've got this pretty thick, pretty deep chord section wing. And you know, you try to force air around that, it creates a fair amount of drag at the same time, although it will produce, and the theory was it produced lots of lift.
The aircraft's primary strength lay in its structure. It made the aircraft incredibly resilient.
Well, I loved the Hurricane. It had no vices. It could take an awful lot of beating. If it was shot at, the bullets would go straight through the canvas and didn't do any damage with a bit of luck.
Its speed was also a revelation to the pilots when they first flew it.
Well, the last of the biplane fighters, you're talking about the Gloucester Gauntlet, the Gloucester Gladiator, and before that, of course, the Fury. Those aeroplanes are probably good for around about 210, 215 miles an hour at the best. Whereas the Hurricane really is just cruising at that speed. On the level, you'll probably get 280 miles an hour, 290 miles an hour out of a Hurricane. So a large increase. What are we talking about here? We're talking about 80, 90 miles an hour increase in terms of your all-out speed. And of course, you haven't got a top wing that obstructs your view either, because if you sit in the Fury or a Gauntlet or a Gladiator, your view upwards through that wing is tremendously obstructed.
You must remember that we hadn't much knowledge of any other aeroplanes, but having flown old-fashioned aeroplanes, to fly a Hurricane was a giant step forward. Easy to fly comparatively. It had a good gun platform. In other words, if you did hit something, it was effective, and it was a good, solid, safe aeroplane. It had no vices as such, so you felt very comfortable and happy flying it.
While the Spitfires were held back in Britain for home defence, the Hurricanes were sent to France to support the British Expeditionary Force. When the German Blitzkrieg began on May 10, 1940, the Hurricane was effectively the only modern British fighter standing between the Luftwaffe and the French army. Its resilient design had some advantages.
Don't forget, in the beginning of the battle, there were no such thing as runways. We were all flying off grass fields, and in France, as we were flying even out of cornfields. The Hurricane, with its wide undercarriage, could land and take off in any of those, in any condition. One thing about a Hurricane, you could outturn a Messerschmitt. It was very manoeuvrable. It wasn't as fast. You couldn't catch one if you were chasing one, but if they were on your tail, you could turn inside it very easily.
But it was the Battle of Britain where the Hurricane truly earned its fame. Tasked with the heavy lifting, the Hurricane squadrons focused on destroying German bomber formations, while the faster Spitfires held off the fighter escorts. However, the Messerschmitt 109s had huge advantages in combat.
The Hurricane compared to the 109, I'm afraid the 109 is a much more capable aeroplane in many respects, particularly the E models, which of course had been facing. The E model had cannons, 20mm cannons, so it's a massive advantage in terms of armament. The early Hurricanes would have had 8 machine guns, 8 303 machine guns. So the 109 is better in terms of armament. The rate of roll on an E model Messerschmitt is very, very good indeed. So much better rate of roll.
We in the Hurricanes always attacked the German bombers coming in large formations. We had done 2 or 3 bomber attacks, and then I guess a 109, frankly, I didn't see it. Got me on fire and I had to jump out. So I finished up on the end of a parachute in the North Sea.
But in the end, the rugged Hawker Hurricane would go on to claim 60% of the RAF's total victories in the battle. However, its true legacy was its adaptability. As air superiority tactics shifted, the Hurricane evolved from a high-altitude interceptor into a potent ground attack platform. The Mark II-C introduced four 20mm Hispano cannons, while the Mark II-D earned the nickname the Flying Can Opener by mounting two 40mm anti-tank guns for armor busting in North Africa. Its versatility extended to the Atlantic, where the Sea Hurricane operated from carriers and catapult-armed merchant ships to protect convoys. From the defense of Malta to the jungles of Burma and the Soviet front, over 14,500 units were produced. It served in every major theatre of the Second World War, proving that durability and stability were just as lethal as raw speed. Today, there are an increasing amount of restored Hurricanes taking to the skies, and they're very popular with airshow crowds. Modern display pilots recognize what a privilege it is to fly them.
Well, as an aircraft to handle, the Hurricane is actually relatively straightforward in terms of taking off and landing, whereas the 109, until you get used to it, is anything but, although the small, light E model is better than the later ones. The Hurricane feels very, very stable on the ground, what I would call a very sure-footed aeroplane. In the air, people say the Hurricane's stable. I'm sorry, it absolutely is not a stable aeroplane. In pitch, it's neutrally stable at best, which means that if you change the attitude of the aeroplane, you pitch it up or pitch it down, and you leave it there, don't expect it to be there if you look away for a split second, because it just wanders off. It kind of has a mind of its own. So yeah, it is not the stable aeroplane people think it is in the air, but relatively easy to take off and land.
A lot of people go, you know, oh, Hurricane, Spitfire, take your pick. We take the Spitfire every day, but they're both so totally different. It's unbelievable. The Spitfire is a sports car, a real lady. It just does what you want. You point it in the right direction like a jet, and it'll just do everything for you. It's lovely to fly. The Hurricane is a bit more of a working tool. You have to fly it all the time. You can't relax. As soon as you relax, it trims, it just disappears off into a little dive in the corner, so you have to haul it back again. So it keeps you on your toes. And on top of that, it gets very, very warm because of the coolant pipes coming from the engine come down the side of the cockpit, so you end up coming out like a little sweating thing. And every trip's an adventure. You never just jump in and go. You always think about it. And as you strap in, you just think this is a huge privilege, no matter what you're flying. It's fabulous.
It really was a lovely aeroplane to fly. I wish I wasn't so old. I'd like to fly one again.
take the load and the rescue hook and set it out. Right, Spitfire, 86.03.